Indeed, on the 21st of September 2001, the torso of a young boy was discovered in the River Thames. Over 10 years on, and the case is currently the Metropolitan Police's only unsolved child murder.
We've not identified the child, and consequently we've taken the unprecedented step of giving him a name. It's Adam.
The murder was dubbed by the media the torso in the Thames, and it sent shockwaves throughout the UK. Groundbreaking forensic testing accompanied by academic research left police in no doubt that this was a horrifying and brutal ritualistic killing. Almost 11 years on, and tragically, Adams is not an isolated incident. Earlier this year, Magali Bamu and Eric Bakobi were given life sentences for murdering Magali's 15-year-old brother Christy whilst performing an exorcism. These abhorrent practices of terrifying child abuse still occur in our country.
Well, during the early stages of Adam's case, police brought in criminologist and expert witness Dr. Richard Hoskins to help with their investigation, and Richard is with us now. Just to warn you that some of the details we're going to be discussing are quite hard-hitting. If you've got little ones with sensitive ears, then you might want to take them out of the room. So this is the case that shocked everybody. It came quite soon after 9/11,
yeah.
And so the eyes of the country were actually on those horrors. It could very nearly have slipped under the radar, this one, couldn't it?
Absolutely, and the discovery by a member of the public of the little boy's torso in the Thames was quite by chance. He was crossing Tower Bridge, spotted something with orange, what turned out to be orange shorts on. The police reckon one more tide and the torso would have gone out to sea, and nobody would have, known anything about this child.
So what are the facts of those cases? What do you know about that torso and that boy now?
Well, this is the extraordinary thing. To start with, the police had nothing to go on. They had no information at all, really. I mean, we guessed, well, the forensics guessed early on that he was of of African or West Indian extraction, and that was it. And they called me up because I was lecturing on African religions and knew a little bit about African tribal religions. They called me into the case and the investigation, and we went from there. And in the book, I go through that whole story about how we built a picture of what we know about him. And we got to the point, in fact, of knowing the exact village that he came from in West Africa.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I tell in the book. It's a long story, and a painstaking one that combines the cultural insights, but also the groundbreaking forensic work. And early on, I was able to give a bit of a steer away from South Africa towards West Africa for reasons that I make clear in The Boy in the River.
And part of those reasons being the contents of the torso's intestine.
That's right. The contents of the intestine, which contains certain ingredients, and there were other factors about the body which I go into in the book. And I was able to, and I knew actually relatively quickly, and it also threw me back to my past in Africa. When I went out as a young man, which is a whole other strand that I tell in the book, and I brought those two things together in a way, and that's what enabled me to give them steer towards West Africa, and a particular area of West Africa, and the forensics. Then we all worked together as a team, and we were able to narrow right down.
So you knew as soon as you saw this torso straight away that it was some sort of sacrifice or some sort of ritualistic killing, didn't you?
I did. Well, what happened is that I was called into the case, and the case threw me back into my past, which I went to Africa as a young man, an idealistic young man, just after Live Aid 1. I went out there and encountered things. I was supposed to go for 6 months and ended up staying 6 years in the rainforest, no electricity, no running water. And this is the other strand that runs right through the book, and I think it's quite important to tell people it's not just a true crime book, it's also about my personal journey. And the reason that was so important was that in the case I was thrown back to something that happened to me out in Africa and the encounter with sacrifice out there, and it was that realization that what I was seeing here with this torso was what I had been forced to confront out in Africa that suddenly made me realize that this was a sacrifice, it was West African. And it's mind-blowing. I mean, to think that here we are sitting by the river, here in this capital city, a young boy went through this horrendous act.
Well, what were the clues then that Holly alluded to there that made you believe that this torso was part of a ritualistic killing?
Well, it's quite detailed and nuanced, and I don't want to get too graphic for viewers at this time, this time of the morning. But basically, he was drained of blood. We know that, and the cuts were very precisely done.
The knife was sharpened after
between each cut.
Each cut.
Yeah, and and I knew from that and other details to do with the body, as I go into in the book, that that actually this was what we're dealing with here was a sacrifice.
Yes, but you're saying that you believed that he'd been poisoned 48 hours before the murder, and that he was alive.
Yeah, absolutely. And
unconscious.
Yes, I mean what I go.
But paralysed.
But paralysed so that he couldn't scream out. I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. But what we go into, I know it's awful, and it is horrendous. And I suppose part of me, and I'm sure for the police sometimes, they might think, well, perhaps one more tide and it would have washed the body away.
Well, I assume is that what happened to the head and the.
Well, we don't know what happened, but I mean, there are some people who probably think, well, maybe that would have been a good thing, but actually. We can't sweep it under the carpet. We can't. We have to address this. And
what do the police believe happened to the head and the limbs that were never discovered?
Well, we don't know. They may have been buried somewhere to give, luck to the people that did it, or they may have actually washed out as well to see it separately.
So what is the reason people do this? What do they think is going to happen by sacrificing a child?
Well, I think that what they thought was that it would bring them power. We don't know the exact reason, but there have been some reports from people who were inside the case to say that it's to bring them power for something that they needed here in London. And I suppose that's the most mind-blowing thing. But it is, for me, it was this confrontation with my own past in Africa as a young man and the tragedy that occurred to me.
We'll mention that because you say in the late 80s you lived in Africa. Your partner at the time had twins.
Yeah.
And sadly lost one of the twins very early on. And then what happened after that?
Well, I got a visit one day. Basically, the second daughter Abigail was unwell, and I got a visitor who came to say. The reason she's unwell is that the first twin is calling her. And this opened me up into a world, a spirit world, if you like, that I was totally unfamiliar with. I was just a home counties, young man going out idealistic to help in Africa. And it opened this whole world up to me. And he said, you need to perform a sacrifice. You spill the blood of a goat or a chicken, spill the blood, your daughter will be fine. And that was the confrontation. I tell this story in the book, and the two stories run parallel through The Boy in the River. And it took me to this point where I suppose like any parent watching this will think, well, if you thought it would work, would you do it? Would you do that?
And you didn't.
And you didn't.
I didn't.
And?
My second daughter died. Abigail died.
And now do you wish you had?
I raised this question right at the end of the book because I was in the Old Bailey. I was in the witness stand at the Old Bailey in the witchcraft trial, and I looked across, and I was asked in the stand to take the people in the court back to my time in Africa and to explain the spirit world. And it took me back to that question: would I do it now? And I looked across and I saw the pictures of Eric Bakubi and Magali Bamu, and I thought no, because even now to cross into another world and a belief system. Where does it end? Where does it stop?
Absolutely.
And this is the question I raise in the book, I suppose.
We've been very Africa-heavy here, but this is not something that is necessarily just in Africa. This is throughout the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've just literally yesterday I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to finish a big police report on a major case that obviously I can't go into details on, but a major case, nothing to do with Africa. White people did a ritualistic killing. And that was that case, and a totally different case that's totally non-African.
I do want to mention, just finally, Joyce, because in 2008 there was an interview with a lady called Joyce by an ITV news crew, which I very clearly remember watching. She'd been deported to Africa for other immigration issues. She had allegedly been caring for Adam, who had disappeared, in her care. Associates that she'd been involved with had been involved and, in fact, convicted of people trafficking. She says that he was called Ikpomosa and that he'd been killed in Lewisham. There's an awful lot of details there. How come this woman was not put in prison? She,
well, we did find, we had convictions for trafficking, people who trafficked around the case, including those associates of Joyce. Joyce Ozigiede was deported back to Nigeria before actually the police had finished their inquiries for immigration reasons, and then a whole lot of evidence came to light. She's in Nigeria. I think the CPS probably feel that it's too much, it's too high profile and too risky to bring her back to this country for further questioning.
So in which case that leaves you, as someone who worked on the case, it leaves you with this terrible American thing without closure, and the police officers involved in the case, it means that you have to deal with something that is unresolved. This little boy's murder is unresolved.
And it's haunting, and it is haunting that it's unresolved, and I'm very clear about that. And in the epilogue, I'm very clear about the fact we didn't solve it. We've solved other cases. We got the killers of Christy Bamu, for instance, and that brings closure. And it's the how do you cope strategy, and yesterday's case has got a closure to it, and I literally bagged it up and shoved it into a cupboard, and that's it, it's gone, as far as I'm concerned. But this case haunts.
Yes, I imagine
it does.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Your story here, The Boy in the River, Richard Hoskins, and there it is right now. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. If you've got any information on Adam's case, then you can contact Crime Stoppers UK. It's never too late. 0800 555 111.
And if you've been affected by anything we've just discussed, there are details of helplines on our website, itv.com/thismorning. We'll see you after this short break.